I was born in a little tiny place called Cwmpen in Snowdonia, just on the edge of Snowdonia, near Blaen and Festiniog, and I lived there until I was 5, and then we moved down here to pretty much to this village and lived in lots of different houses. Yeah, spent my whole childhood down here. I went away to university and then I went to live in France, and whenever I went away I always kind of came back here, and I think it's because if you grow up here you do fall in love with the landscape, and so I'd always kind of get drawn back. But by then my parents didn't have houses, either of them, so I would end up living in tents and vans, and eventually in a static caravan with my boyfriend at the time. And then I basically left him, went to Bristol to try and kind of make, I was in my late 20s and I was thinking I needed to go and get on with doing something and get a career of some sort and do the normal thing, but I failed to do that, so I was just living in a big shared house with lots of people, quite a normal situation, but I'm quite introverted and I found it really stressful, and we'd kind of occasionally fall out with housemates and it would all kind of get really stressful. It just felt like too many people living together. And I was doing lots of random jobs on a sort of working for myself, so I never knew, it was always quite stressful to make the rent. And I was in a room that wasn't supposed to be a bedroom, so there was kind of an element of stress because we'd have these inspections, and I don't know, the whole thing kind of just became, for me, kind of an untenable living situation, but I couldn't see how to change it because obviously housing was getting more and more expensive and there was no way I could have afforded anything else. So, and I really wanted to write a book at the time, a different book, my first book, and I just got more and more frustrated at the kind of fact that I was wasting my time doing stuff I didn't really want to do, and I wasn't even saving any money and I wasn't even happy. And there was all this other stuff I really did want to do, and it seemed really kind of, I guess, unfair that just because, I couldn't find a way, I couldn't make enough money to kind of make enough headspace or time to do anything creative. Eventually, I guess it all just kind of whipped itself up into a kind of crisis, I suppose, and I remembered that, so this is a place where my dad used to work, but then he went bankrupt and it was kind of left to go derelict, really. It was used on and off, but it wasn't really being used. And when I'd been in Cornwall before, I'd camped in it a bit, just to kind of to be somewhere on my own and not whenever I was having a bad time or something, and I sort of thought, well, maybe I'll just go and camp there again for a bit and get a bit of headspace and sort of figure out how to get my life on track, because I think I was pretty depressed by then in Bristol. So I kind of just left, came here, and it was very different then. It was very, there was no electricity, there was no toilet or anything. I mean, that's really new. Garden was really overgrown. It was all, I painted it and stuff. It was all kind of really spidery, and all my dad's stuff was still here from before he went bankrupt. It was all a bit Miss Havisham, and but it, instantly I was kind of like, okay, wow, like I've got a bit of time and I'm not so anxious about rent, and it was only meant to be temporary. I think I just really wanted to come back here and be here with this at home. I just needed to come home and just be like in my place. But then once I was here, it was kind of the same story. I realised that I couldn't afford to rent anywhere on my own, so I'd have to move into another house share, and even that would be expensive, and I couldn't stand the thought of living with strangers, and I still wanted to write my book. So it just ended up being that this is where I stayed, because that was my chance basically to do the stuff that I wanted to do. I just remember kind of walking around Bristol desperately wanting to find somewhere that I could just be on my own, and just like looking at spaces thinking, oh, I could live in there, you know, like some kind of tumble down shack or something. And there were all these empty flats, because this is just after the crash, the financial crash. So there was all these developments that had been built and not sold, and they were just empty, and it was just like, you know, what the hell, like we're all kind of crammed into this house and we're all miserable. There's all these empty flats, but obviously, you know, you can't, it's the economics of it. It's not about whether or not people need a house and a home, it's about how much money you've got. And I sort of wanted, I was dreaming of living on boats, or even living in my van on a campsite, you know, because I just wanted to be I wanted to be on my own, I guess, and have the space to write this book. By then I was in my early 30s, and I think when I'm anxious and miserable, I do withdraw, and I find it really stressful to come in and, you know, have to deal with people every single day, and the minute I get up have to talk to people. I think for me, that I realised as I've got older, I've realised that I'm really bad at that. I don't think it's true for everyone, but I also do think once you get into your 30s, living with a boyfriend's one thing, but living with just strangers is really hard, especially if there's lots of them and they're kind of changing, and, you know, yeah, I found that really hard. The longer I lived here, and then having written my first book, I was like, do you know what, actually, my whole life's experience with housing is a kind of, there's a lot in there that I think a lot of people would probably relate to, and I wanted to explore it. And then I got into the political side, and then obviously that made me really angry, because actually if you look at it, it's there's lots of quite serious sort of inequality and greed, and, you know, and I think it's all linked up. So some of the other crises, like ecological crises, and it's all to do with how we choose to live. So it's a bit of a metaphor as well, for how we relate to the world. We're kind of all locking ourselves away in these plush little cages, and it's all a bit weird. I mean, I think it's easier for me because I have lived in vans, and I'm kind of used to, I've experienced that kind of lifestyle, but that wasn't why, I wasn't searching for that at the time at all. In fact, I've kind of been, you know, when I got here I was like, how can I get the internet? And, you know, now I kind of wish I could get rid of the internet, but it's too late. But I actually think that's an interesting question, because I think it's much easier to adapt to this kind of lifestyle, a simpler lifestyle that involves being much more connected to the outside world than it is, you know, I think I'm mentally healthier, much healthier than I was. And I think everyone would be. I think we've lost something really precious, which is our sense of our own connection to an ecosystem. When I came here, I didn't know the names of birds and the names of plants, and I didn't know how to grow anything. And I've learned a lot, and I know the different creatures, and I kind of worry about them, and it feels personal when they're threatened, you know, and sparrows nest right up where I sleep, pretty much. And so when I put the new roof on, I didn't take the old roof off, because I was like, well, I'm not going to ruin their house. And those kinds of decisions come really easily once you live closely to other creatures, whereas I think if you're shut off from them, it isn't so much part of your sense of self. I found writing it really hard, and it took me a while, and I think over that time I changed. So my relationship with this place kept changing, and I had a robbery and everything was stolen, and, you know, had quite a lot of ups and downs, and sometimes, you know, in the winter it's quite tough here sometimes, and I've often questioned my choices, and, you know, when I was writing I didn't even know if I'd get it published, and so it was quite a long and lonely journey, and I'm really glad it's over, and I'm also really terrified because it's really personal, and I feel really exposed.